Good morning, everybody. It is September 9th, and we're at a Finance Committee meeting of the Board of Education of Darien, Connecticut. We have a brief schedule this afternoon, or agenda this morning, actually. Round two of the committee meetings of the doubleheader this morning after curriculum. And like Mrs. Parent highlighted, we're really glad to be back to school in a regular fashion for the first time in a number of years. So thank you, everybody that's making that happen. It's glorious. So I'm just going to hand it off to Rich to run us through the agenda. The first one being the fiscal 22 financial report through June 22.
Yep. Okay. So this is the year-end financial report for fiscal year 22. So the unaudited financial statements show a year-end balance of $694,439, which is pretty much in line with where we were for the May forecast. It's about $11,000 higher. I did want to highlight, and there's a chart in the packet. While $694,000 does seem like a lot, if you actually extract out the excess cost reimbursement, which was just really a higher reimbursement rate, and then the portion of budget control that was unused, we were really left with basically $102,000 on a $110 million budget. So it was a pretty razor thin margin that we ended the year with. So it's about 0.1%, a little more than that. There were some changes from the May forecast, which I'll highlight. So as I mentioned earlier, the changes were 11,107 from where we forecasted in May. The largest difference was building rentals were down about 28,000, and that was just due to lower enrollment in some of the after-school programs like Darien After School and Studio for Performing Arts. Utilities ended up a little higher than forecast, including heat, electricity, and water by about 9,000. Legal fees, including both RC 16 and 24, were about $5,400 more than expected, as legal fees for special education primarily trended higher in the last month. ELP tuition was lower by about $847, and that was just really due to a reclassification of a student to special education. Property insurance, pretty minor at $81. Some various operating accounts within special education, including consultant services, contracted speech, OT, and PT, for about 10,000. Health insurance did end the year with a positive 10,309, and that's really due to dental and vision claims. So we're fully insured for medical, but dental is self-insured, so that's where you do see a little bit of the fluctuation. Consultant services in RC 19 shows a positive balance of 8,000, and that was for partial fulfillment of DEI services. And then if we look at a lot of those smaller accounts throughout the chart of accounts, like office supplies, textbooks, resource materials, classroom reference, across all the RCs, it was about $7,800 to the positive compared to the previous forecast. Substitutes, ESY, and overtime were about $6,800 better than expected. Curriculum development, $4,800. The COVID accounts did end the year at a positive balance of $2,900. There was a little bit more savings in the disinfectant account for the buses. Retirement and FICA was a little bit better. Medicaid reimbursement was better by about $1,100. And then again, those various equipment accounts across all the RCs were only about $91 off from forecast. So as we do in all the previous months, the general education RCs were a positive 124,460. Special education RCs were a positive 565,327. Again, with the bulk of that really being excess cost reimbursement. And then the COVID RC 28 was $4,600 to the positive. Just going quickly through some of the RCs, the only change really at Darien High School were some of those various operating accounts, which was about $500 to the positive. No real change at Fitch. And then at the middle school, the various operating accounts were $59 to the positive. At Hindley, again, those various operating accounts, positive 133. Homes, again, those various operating accounts, positive 475. Ox Ridge, again, those various operating accounts, positive 179. Royal, 154 for those various operating accounts. And then Tokenique, $123 in those various operating accounts. Moving to RC 11, some of those various operating accounts like trainer supplies and interscholastics, $300 to the positive. In RC 12, the biggest difference really were those building rentals, as I mentioned earlier. RC 13, there was a positive balance again in those various operating accounts for 566. Art, $20 for those various operating accounts. RC 15 equipment ended the year with a positive balance of 87. RC 16 legal fees were a little bit better than expected. They are a positive $8,500. Health, again, those various operating accounts, 185. Personnel, those various operating accounts, 129. If we move to RC 19, the consultant services that I mentioned, a positive $8,400. And then again, those various operating accounts, $443. In RC 20, travel was really the only difference at a positive 250. Library was 415 in those various operating accounts. And then tech ed, 187 in those various operating accounts. And then in special education, legal fees had a positive balance of 10,900, which was slightly less than we anticipated. And then again, some of those various operating accounts, contracted OT, contracted speech and PT, a positive 7,700. Tuition ended up being positive 20,949, slightly better than expected. And then if we go to RC 25, as I mentioned earlier, some of the utilities, heat, water, electricity, telephone, and sewer, all positive, but slightly less than anticipated. And then, as I mentioned earlier, health insurance, which really includes our dental and our vision as well, was positive 10,309, really primarily due to those dental claims. ELP tuition did end short by about $40,000, but pretty much in line with where we expected from the previous month.
Anybody have any questions on this fiscal year end report? I just have two quick ones. Building rentals, Rich, is there any way to figure out whether this was related to COVID, the shortfall, and like, could you see it earlier months or?
So in the beginning of the year, we actually saw a lot more in use of fields fees. So we far exceeded use of fields. So the net of the two was pretty much in line. You know, we've heard more people wanted to rent our fields as opposed to rent our buildings because maybe they were cooped up for the last couple of years and they'd rather be outside than inside. We have seen a little bit of an uptick to start the year for buildings, but it'll probably be a little bit lower than expected.
Okay.
Fields are really what's driving it. It could possibly be because, you know, kids want to be outside more if they were cooped up for a while.
And then we had done a transfer on the consultant line, and there seems to be a surplus. Why don't you just comment on what happened there?
So the balance of that DEI consultant services primarily for the consultant to do community conversations, given the timing of how long it took to get things in place. And then what was happening at that particular time, that was the part that wasn't completed.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Dennis?
No.
Okay. Then we'll just go to the accounting adjustments for June.
Yep. I just wanted to highlight the food service financial report.
Oh,
We did end the year with a positive $17,000 in profit, which brings the fund balance to $432,000. It is the strongest profit and strongest fund balance the district's had in over 10 years.
and that's expected to continue based on the
Yep,
quality.
so the start of the school year has been pretty good. Granted, we're only like a week into it. But just as you remember, like we typically start with the deficit in the
Yeah.
account because you have some pre-expenses and then it kind of picks up as the year goes on, but we'd expect it to continue.
I mean, will that balance continue to grow if you have another successful year?
It will. So typically what happens is if you have a few really successful years, you want to take that balance and start reinvesting in food service equipment. So new refrigerators, stoves, things like that. Maybe redesign some of the way the students go through the line. We've been looking at the middle school because there's a little bit of a bottleneck just the way it's designed. They did some work at the high school actually as part of the agreement with Chartwell's, they actually gave us an investment to do that. And so as that balance grows, the idea is to reinvest it into the program, investing into the program with better equipment and more options and better flow through the line will actually increase sales long-term. And then the idea is to, keep growing it. And if it does, it can even offset some of your operating costs in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Middle school, fastest 20 minutes of lunch ever. If you're a sixth grader, get down from the top floor. I had lunch with the kids yesterday. And just coincidentally, just independently, I wasn't even asking about the lunch. They said the lunch here at the middle school is great. So there you go.
Very cool.
John, just a quick question on that.
I had a sandwich and a parfait.
Go ahead.
Rich, I see that this is based on our P&L. How does this compare to previous lives in your previous jobs?
So this was very, very successful. I think our target, and we said this when we brought them in, is the flagship probably in Fairfield County right now is Westport. They're a little bit bigger, but if you talk to the finance director in Westport, Staples is basically a cash cow. They use it to offset costs for facilities. They use it for reinvestment in equipment. We certainly have the ability to be on par, if not exceed Westport. I mean, obviously their district's a little bit bigger than ours. And we only made the change a couple of years ago, and last year was really our first close to normal year that you would have. And I would expect this year to be just as good. The one dip we would expect really is Oxford, just because based on the construction, they don't actually have a true cafeteria right now.
Right.
But there's no reason we couldn't be just as good, if not better, than Westport going forward.
Thank you.
And just pricing, I mean, we're not, what's the pricing trajectory on this?
So the district hasn't raised its prices for regular meals in quite a while.
Okay.
And then there's a la carte items, obviously, which are outside of that normal like school lunch program.
Okay.
And then the pavilion is also did very well for the district, and Chartwell's plans on running it again for this.
Perfect. Great. Okay.
I think you answered this last time, but are we expecting any inflationary pressure on our food purchasing? I know a lot of us are-
We've been very lucky in terms of keeping prices relatively low. Chartwell's is a much larger company, so they have much greater purchasing power. They actually own farms throughout the United States where they can source some of this food. So we haven't seen significant inflationary pressures. When we're unable to actually source food, Megan Bendish, who is our director of food service in Chartwell's, who does a fantastic job, will actually go to Costco or BJ's if she has to source chicken or whatever it might be. But for the most part, we've been pretty good.
All right, thank you.
I would just mention, just at this point, it'd be my experience that these programs rise and fall on the staff, and particularly the leadership of the staff. And Megan is just absolutely phenomenal. So,
Okay.
congratulations to her and all the staff.
Awesome. Thank you.
Super success.
Accounting adjustments now?
So we have no budget transfers at the end of the year. We did include some accounting adjustments, which were pretty minor, which were all stayed within broad category.
Okay. The June PowerPoint was the item that you highlighted, the breakdown of the grant, the state grant, and the normalization of the surplus, I guess, is.
Yeah,
is
so
that what
really,
that line item
so
is?
again, we're giving back close to $700,000.
Okay.
548, I believe it was, is excess cost alone. So that the reimbursement rate was over 80%. So certainly much more significant than we had expected, which is why we got so much more money back. I will highlight again, we did mention it a few months ago. The state budget that was passed did change the way reimbursement for excess cost is done. It's now tiered based on town wealth. And so now our reimbursement rate will be capped at 70%. So we did budget 75 for the upcoming year. So we would probably expect to get less depending on how claims settle out.
Okay. And then if cost of recovery services, well, we haven't done the grant report yet either. If you could just run through the grant.
Real quick. So no real significant changes in the grant. The IDEA grant, which is a 2-year grant, and we do always roll over a small balance, so we don't get hit with essentially grant compression. We'll be carrying over $112,000. The IDEA ARP grant, which was a new grant for fiscal year 22 and is a 2-year grant, we are expending all in fiscal year 23, and that is for the SLP and psychologists that were added as part of the budget process. The title grant, we are carrying over a little bit of money, about $8,000. Title grant is primarily professional development. Title II, again, is another professional development grant, and it's a multi-year grant, and we intend to carry over $50,000 for professional development. Title III is for English language learners. It is a relatively small grant for the district, and it typically funds materials and professional development for EL students. And then Title IV, we are carrying over just under $6,000. And again, that's primarily used to support professional development. The Team Mentor Grant is a grant that was 100% expended. It is actually a grant that's been reduced by the state for a number of years and doesn't actually cover our full cost. So in RC 18, you do see a funding line item for the difference for the Team Mentor Program. The Special Education COVID Grant was expended in full, and that supported ESY, which was the ESY not from this current summer, but the previous summer. The ARP ESSER funds, we are intending to carry over about $50,000. The grant will carry over a total of 158, but some of those are earmarked for ESY that occurred this past summer that started in the end of June, but actually carries over into July. And then Unified Sports, that was expended in full. And then the Darien Foundation did support the robotics program in the first year, and then they have given us the initial funding for year 2, which is the current year.
Awesome. And then if you could just, I think hopefully this is the last time we'll be talking about COVID expenses.
So the operating fund ended up covering about $56,000. The bulk of that was substitutes, and that was part of the teacher MOU that was done earlier in the year. We did get the grant of $1,025,000, and that was the ARP grant, and that did fund some special education staff, some literacy interventionists for makeup work, recovery services and special education, ESY, and some technology. We did spend, as I mentioned, the majority of it, and we intend to carry over about 158, but really about 50 unencumbered. So when you take out the transfers that were done, we were left with $4,600 of available balance that'll get returned to the town this year, at the end of this year. And really, it was about $800 less than we had anticipated for substitute cost. The transportation cost is the disinfectant program, and that was a combination of first student, the in-district provider, and then our out-of-district providers as well. And then the $1,700 was money that we had set aside in the beginning of the year for things like masks and disinfectant. And then obviously as the year went on, those things kind of faded away a little bit. And so we were left with the $1,700 there.
Great. Any other questions from the committee? Michelle, can we get a public comment?
Absolutely, certainly. There are no raised hands.
All right. So could I get a motion to adjourn? Thank you. In favor? Thank you. We're adjourned.
Good day.